Hi, I'm really excited to finally be making this video. When I was first starting to learn JavaScript's prototypal inheritance, I came across a lot of great resources out there, from MDN to blog posts, screencasts, and also diagrams. But one thing that I noticed over time is that there wasn't really a resource that I could find that taught the subject through physical items being linked together. So I decided to make a video that might help some people out where I link index cards representing JavaScript objects together with pieces of lanyard representing references to each object's prototype. Alright, so the main goal in this section is to get away from the code and get away from diagrams and instead look at items that we can actually touch and hold to try to learn JavaScript's prototypal inheritance in another fashion. So in this case, again, we have Bronc and Sam, which are brontosauruses. And then we have Ducky, which is a horned lizard. All three of these animals are reptiles. And again, all three are animals. And finally, all three are going to be JavaScript objects. So if we're going to call sayName for Ducky, we're going to actually look first at Ducky's object. We're going to see that there's only the property name for Ducky. So then we would follow up the reference to Ducky's prototype. In this case, the horned lizard. We then look at this object. We see there's only one property, which is diet. So we'd keep looking up the prototype chain until we got to the sayName method. Again, reptile, we would just see classification, reptile. And finally, when we reached animal, we would find the sayName method on the animal object. It is this method that exists only on this animal object that will actually get called when we call ducky.sayName. Alright, so when we call ducky.sayName, we know now that it's going to link all the way up to the animal object, which holds the sayName property, which is a method. So, how is that method going to refer back to Ducky? We're actually going to utilize a special keyword in JavaScript, the this keyword. The this keyword has a lot of nuance to it, but the way that we'll be utilizing it within the methods on the animal object will actually allow us to refer back to Ducky when we call ducky.sayName. So in this sayName method that exists on the animal object, we'll actually append this.name, which in turn will refer back to ducky.name in our case. So you might be wondering what would have happened if Ducky did not have a name property directly within itself. Well, let's illustrate this by calling bronc.eat. So again, just like when we call ducky.sayName, we'll first look in the Bronc object and see that there's no eat property. Then we'll look at Brontosaurus, again see that there's no eat property. Follow its prototype link up to reptile, see that there's no eat property. Then follow reptile's prototype link up to animal. And there we'll find that there is in fact an eat property, which again is a method in this case. Within this eat method that exists in the animal object is a reference back to this.diet. So just like when we call ducky.sayName, this reference will refer back to, in this case, Bronc. So we'll look on the Bronc object and see that there is no eat diet property. Then we'll follow his prototype link up to Brontosaurus And there we will in fact find a property of diet, which is in this case the string leaves. And it's this string of leaves that will actually be utilized within the eat method, which exists in the animal object. In our case, it definitely seems like overkill for just 3 animals at the lowest level. Well, let's imagine that instead of having 2 brontosauruses and 1 horned lizard, instead your program is going to have more around 200 million brontosauruses and 100 million horned lizards. Well, in that case, given this model, those 300 million objects will still connect to these 2 objects, which connects to the reptile object, which then connects to the animal object, which has the functionality of say name within it. Counter that with requiring all 300 million objects all to have their own individual say name method. Even if you never intend to create your own custom prototype chains in JavaScript, it's still vitally important to understand the concept. Whenever you call push on an array, slice on an array, or toString on an object, you are utilizing JavaScript's prototypal inheritance. For example, if we call bronc.toString, the same thing as we demonstrated in the earlier parts of this video will hold true. First, we'll look at bronc, see that there's no toString property, traverse up the prototype chain to Brontosaurus, see that there's no toString property, follow Brontosaurus's prototype link to the reptile object. Again, we'll find no toString property. Then up to animal, and the same thing, no toString property. And then we'll get to the base object prototype that exists in JavaScript. And there we will find the toString property, which in this case is a method. And it's this method that exists on the base object prototype that will get called when we call bronc.toString. But imagine if we put a toString property on the bronc object itself. When we call bronc.toString, we would look on the bronc object and find that there is in fact a toString property, which in this case is a method. We would never traverse the prototype chain up to object to find the toString method that exists there. One more thing that is very important to understand about the prototype chain is that the link is one way. So when I call bronc.sayName and I go up to the animal object is connected only to the object via its prototype link. It has no knowledge of the objects that are connected to it. Similarly, this object prototype has no knowledge that the animal prototype is linked to it.